Okay, so why don't we start by, if you don't mind, Josh, just giving us an explanation of the problem that Mosa meat is trying to solve. What are you trying to achieve ultimately?
Yeah, well, that's a great question and the obvious starting point. I think where it really starts is that the current methods of meat production worldwide are really not sustainable. Worldwide demand for meat is increasing. It's going to be up 70% on top of current rates by 2050, and that comes with a whole host of problems. Lots of meat, especially beef, is some of the most climate damaging food there is. That's in terms of carbon emission, but also land usage, water usage, and the associated implications. At the same time, meat is really tasty, and people don't want to stop eating it. There's cultural reasons, there's dietary reasons. So those two problems are coming to a bit of a head in a way. People want to keep eating it. We can't keep producing it without destroying the planet. So that's where we come in, really. We want to try to produce the same tasty meat so that people can keep enjoying this, but without the planetary and the associated downsides. So that's really what the problem is. We want to try and produce meat in a more sustainable way.
Meat almost without the animals, because the scale of it, I hadn't quite understood, and I can't quite get my head around it once I do see the number. Over 70 billion land animals are raised and killed every year for food. 70 billion land animals. So what do you propose doing to mean that people can eat meat without having to raise and kill that number of animals every year?
Yeah, precisely. So the aim here is to still produce the same tissues, still produce the same actual meat products, but growing those cells outside of a living organism. As you said there, that the vast bulk of the animal biomass on the planet today is not humans or wild animals, but farmed animals. So what we want to do is turn that number of farmed animals into a much smaller number, where instead of harvesting their full skeletons to eat, we take a small sample of cells, just around 0.5 gram or so. And we take those cells and we let them do what they would do otherwise, which is to proliferate, to grow and double, and then to specialize into their tissues, especially muscle tissue. That's the one that people like to eat mostly. But to do that outside of the animal. And the cells are actually quite happy and capable of doing this if you give them the right conditions and the right environment. So that's really what the basis of our technology is, to minimize the number of animals down to a much smaller number, and instead of harvesting their full skeletons, take just a small starting sample of cells.
I want to go on to a bit about actually the science behind how you do that, fully in the knowledge that I'm not going to understand a lot of it because I'm not a scientist at all. But I'm definitely tremendously excited by the possibility of this and by the scale of it. You say you get 0.5 gram worth of cells. How much meat, how many burgers is that going to produce?
Well, that's a brilliant question, and it really goes right to the heart of one of the main scientific challenges. The amount of cultured meat that you can grow from a given starting mass is really proportional to the number of generations that you can make those cells go through. That kind of makes sense, of course. For every extra time a cell doubles, then you'll be able to produce twice as many burgers. So what we are really trying to do at Mosa Meat and other companies working in this field is understand how to create cells or how to manage and manipulate our cells so that they can go through many of these generations, 30, 40, even more, and still be able to produce the really high quality muscle tissue that we need. It's an exponential process. So if you have 20 of these generations, you really can't make more than, a couple of burgers for a barbecue. If you have 30, you can start to fill up a supermarket. If you have 40 to 50, then you can start to, be replacing whole parts of the agricultural system. So it's a great question, and that number is something that we're really obsessed with trying to drive up.
I bet, because that's the game, isn't it? I mean, if you can get it to 40, 50, 60, you're starting to completely change the world then. Have you got to the point where at Mosa Meat you've been able to, with whatever the doubling rate is, get to the point where you've been able to go from cell to eating a burger?
Yeah, so we're already at the stage where you can get from a small handful of cells. In general, we don't tend to start from one single cell. Our cells are not super happy to be grown specifically by themselves. But yeah, that's kind of around the number that our proof of principle products will be at. We have great data that suggests we can do a lot better than that as well. But
what
there's a difference. Yeah, so currently in our best cultures we have 35, 40 of these generations. But there's a difference, of course, between your best culture and having this as a robust bioprocess, and that's something that we are also working on. It's not just having this work in a lab. That's all well and good. You need to have it robust and you need to have it scalable so that we can reproduce these results in a production type system.
So that at some stage in the future, don't know when, but at some stage in the future, a company like Mosa Meat or others, will be able to know exactly how to get to 40, 50 generations of the same cell quite quickly without it falling apart at whatever stage because the lab bit's gone wrong.
Precisely, yeah.
So what does it taste like, the meat that you've grown from the cell of a cow?
Yeah, so in general, the taste is very similar, and that's to be expected, to be honest, because it's the same stuff. In general, we know that the fat component of meat is disproportionately responsible for the taste and the sensory experience. You can tune the amount of fat that you put into these products. We of course have much more control over that than say a farmer would perhaps, but even if it's only 10% of the material, it's really makes up the vast majority of the taste. And that's why we're really excited by trying to understand the fatty acid profiles. Those are the types of molecules that make up the fat. We can study those and see whether they're similar to real beef, where we're a little bit off, and we need to try and adjust our process and this kind of thing.
Okay, so I'm just trying to imagine this, because unfortunately I can't eat any of it right now, but the taste will be very meaty without the fatty bit, and the fatty bit is what you're trying to sort of inject, for want of a better word, into the meat to give it the texture and flavour of what meat from a killed cow would taste like.
Yeah, precisely. So we have our process effectively has two halves. We make the muscle and the fat separately. Oh. The muscle is very important. You need it to create that stringy, fibrous kind of texture, which is really critical for meat. And the fat adds a lot of the juiciness and the actual taste profile on top of that. So we're working on both. The fat is especially important to get right from a consumer perspective.
How quickly then could this business scale up to be able to provide meat on the shelves of supermarkets that people could buy? Because I can't help but think that this process is also incredibly expensive.
Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. Of course, like all technologies, the initial costs are very high. That's because there's a lot of infrastructure that we need to set up to be producing these, and lots of the cost savings only come later with scale. And no doubt our first proof of principle products, like those which are already starting to be approved, will be very expensive. It's not going to be a commodity pricing. So the key is really to push on that underlying science as quickly as possible, and at the same time to be scaling up the commercial side so that we can be talking about a few years to be in supermarkets at scale, not just your interesting restaurant or as a kind of alternative, but really within a few years rather than within a few decades. So
and how what do you need to increase that pace? Because I note that the founders of your business in 2013 unveiled the world's first cultured beef burger, which took years of research and €250,000 to make, which is a lot of money and a lot of time. What does a company like Mosa Meat need to speed up that process?
Yeah, so Well, what we need, of course, is scientific breakthroughs, and that's why we employ a large amount of scientists. The vast majority of the workforce here is scientists like myself, trying to understand and manipulate these cells. That's part of what we need, and we've been really lucky to have raised a lot of funds from various different investors to help us do that.
Yes,
we also
including
need
Hollywood. Sorry to jump across you, but including Mr. DiCaprio, Leonardo DiCaprio, I think invests in Mosa meat.
Yeah, he does for sure. Obviously, Leonardo DiCaprio has been an environmentalist for a long time, going back well before the advent of cultured meat or anything like that. But yeah, it was obviously awesome for us to have the profile and interest of someone like that, and yeah, cool that himself and also other high profile investors are really interested in this sector, not just Mosa meat, but some of the other companies. And it's not just meat as well. People also trying to make milk and cheese and dairy products. All sorts of animal products could in theory be replaced with much more sustainable alternatives.
And as you lead this team, Josh, I guess, well, how convinced are you that this process is going to lead to the unwinding of the need for 70 billion land animal deaths a year?
Yeah, well, I'm really hopeful, and it's always good to have that mission there to motivate and to guide us. I think it is still obviously a nascent technology. Lots of the pieces need to come together. They need to come from our side, the scientific side. They need to come in terms of the economics and the scaling. There has to be a regulatory component to this. These are novel foods, which they need to be safe. They're not produced using traditional methods. We think they're very much produced using safe methods. In fact, much safer than traditionally reared meat. We have much more control over the process, but nevertheless, there's a regulatory component, and of course, there's a consumer acceptance component, which we touched on earlier. Meat is a very traditional and emotive food, and it's all well and good in scientific circles and to have people interested. It's quite another to have really whole large scale changes in the food system. So
do you think people are ready for that? Do you think people are ready for that? That they can buy their massive tomahawk steak, they just know that it's been made in a lab, not free roamed, grazed in a field somewhere in America?
Yeah, well, I think that's the key point, is if they can buy their giant tomahawk steak and it tastes just as good, it looks just as good, and it's at an affordable price point, then I think people are ready. That's really the key. All of the surveys that we've done, other people in the industry have done, have shown that it's really price and taste are the major drivers. And of course, we can hopefully edge our way into the market with people who would be prepared to pay a premium for a new product based on its sustainability credentials and this kind of stuff. But ultimately, yeah, you're right. If your average consumer is going to be ready for it, then it has to taste brilliant, and it has to be at an affordable price point.
And you've tasted it, yeah?
Yeah, I've tasted some small samples.
Good.
In general, it is good. As I said, the fat in particular is really the important thing to get right. We are not always eating our experiments. The problem is that you need quite a lot of you obviously need to make quite a lot of tissue to get a decent size bite out of it. You can't just taste like a few cells and expect to get the sensory experience. A lot of it's in the mouthfeel, how it bites and this kind of stuff. So we're not in the process of eating like every experiment that we do. I think we will get to this stage before too long. But yeah, obviously our small tasting events are super exciting, and also help to really remind us what we're trying to do here, which is cool science, but also make something really tasty.
Let me give you a final scenario. It's Monday, the 14th of November, 2030. Do you think by then you will be unveiling burgers on supermarket shelves made in a lab?
Well, I don't think at that point they'll be made in a lab. They'll be made in something much more akin to a production facility, of course. I think that there's a great chance that a large proportion of the meat on offer will be something like this in plant-based alternatives, our products alongside traditional meat. I think 2030 would be a little bit ambitious for like a full revamp of your supermarket shelf. But yeah, I'm super hopeful and super excited that by this time we will be the sort of product that your consumer can go and pick from the shelves and, you know, compare the label with the traditional product and hopefully pick ours.
Great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.